Hi there, I'm Duana Taha. I'm thrilled to be in conversation with Dan Erickson, courtesy of VIF. A little intro for those of you who don't know. Dan Erickson began writing plays and making movies with his siblings and friends at a young age and went on to get his BA in English and creative writing from Western Washington University. He later attended NYU's Tisch School, where he received a master's in dramatic writing. Upon moving to LA, Dan delivered food and worked in a string of office jobs, all while conceiving and writing the original pilot for Severance. The script became the first TV pilot ever selected for the annual Bloodlist, which ultimately led to a creative partnership with Red Hour Productions, Endeavor Content, and Apple. Dan splits his time between LA and New York while sneaking back to his beloved Washington State every chance he gets. The creator of Severance, please welcome Dan Erickson.
Hi, Duana. How are ya?
I am pretty good. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us. There is so much to chat about.
It's so good to be here.
Very exciting. I asked you just before we began which question you've been asked most often. And you said, you know, there was a lot about where did this idea come from? I don't have that question because I can imagine that it is having worked one or many terrible jobs or jobs that thought they were pretty cute and great and fine. My question to you is, do the people at your real life Lumen know that they're the inspiration for Lumen? Are you getting DMs from everybody in your life going, it was us, wasn't it? Come on.
Oh God, I hope not. No, I have gotten DMs from, I haven't gotten DMs from any of the bad guys, I'll say that. And any of the, you know, mysterious higher ups represented on the show. I have gotten DMs from, you know, former coworkers and people who have sort of been in those particular trenches with me. And those have mostly been appreciative, yeah. But
they recognize that some of your jokes and references are just for them, yeah?
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's, you know, it's all stuff I'm grateful for now, but you know, little just weird corporate idiosyncrasies that I collected along the way, you know, the people who I knew from those worlds will reach out and be like, hey, I recognize that.
You know, there's a kind of an obvious sentiment that that the show might resonate with anybody who's ever been in kind of a terrible workplace dystopia. Was there anything that you actually had to explain to like the showbiz world of Los Angeles that yes, this is a real thing, or yes, this is a reference that people make? Or
yeah, I mean, a lot of the people, you know, who were producing the show or who were working on the show, you know, had their own experience in those kind of jobs, you know, some of it years ago, some of it more recently. But, you know, yeah, there was some stuff like the sort of the core principles and the slightly culty elements of the corporate world where I'm like, no, this is real. Like, this isn't, I basically didn't exaggerate that at all. The core principles are actually like a less ridiculous version of something I really encountered at one of the jobs where it was like, you know, there was these themed principles that didn't really make any sense. And they sent somebody around. There was like someone came from the national office and they came around to introduce the principles to us. And the trip, I'm sure, cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, you know, so it's all stuff that you sort of, if you're wanting to be a creative person and eventually turn this into a story, you're just sort of putting all that in your pocket as you go along.
if I understood you correctly, you're saying that you toned everything down for Lumon. That's
not everything, but some things.
It's that's terrifying enough to be going on with. I think that overall it's very clear that this is coming from a couple of different pain points, including I was saying you're speaking largely to a Canadian audience here. Though that we have many climates throughout this vast country, in the East don't think we've ever seen winter portrayed more honestly or brutally on screen. Was that important? Was that a real choice? How did that go down?
Yeah, I mean, we did say, we were like, if we get this wrong, the Canadians are going to come for us. You know, they're going to know that we faked it. I am honestly really happy to hear you say that, because that was one of the hardest elements of this thing. Like, a really green writer. I'd never actually been in a writer's room before. And so I had certainly never had to go out and be on a shoot and sort of live the reality of the things I was writing before. So I would just, you know, very willy-nilly be like, okay, let's do another nighttime scene in the snow. And, you know, not realizing, A, that, you know, that's always a nightmare to have to make that happen, you know, on any shoot. And B, that, you know, Ben Stiller is the most meticulous person in the world, and is not going to do anything, you know, halfway. And so, you know, he and Aoife McCardle, our other director, you know, they were very adamant that those scenes do feel real, and that, you know, we shoot them out somewhere very cold at night. And so we had a great crew that were great. It was tough.
And you started thinking about ways that Lumon suddenly could have like a climate control over the town, you know, in second season, I assume. Yes.
Yeah, or I don't know. I mean, they probably have an office in you know, Phoenix or somewhere a little bit more warm.
Well, speaking of, let's get into it then. Let's talk about the specificities of Lumen. You know, this show has more than most developed an incredible number of fan theories. What is your process with that? Are you engaging with them? Are you laughing at them? Do you have to avoid them? Like, what's your sort of take on that?
Yeah, I was told right off the bat to like avoid Reddit, because they're like, it's gonna poison your brain, like you're gonna get totally in your head. It's gonna become this weird feedback loop that's gonna drive you into the mouth of madness. And so I for about, you know, 10 minutes didn't go on Reddit, and then I caved, and I went once, and I was surprised, cautiously surprised and delighted to find that it was this just wonderful, positive, delightful community of people who were just really excited about the show. And it wasn't just a lot of people for various things. I was like, oh, this response is actually really it's really positive, and it's sort of inspiring, because you know, it's all this brand new art that's being created. And then the theories, which are, I mean, there are always some that are outlandish, but it's an outlandish show, so like I sort of don't blame anybody for that. But then, yeah, a lot of it is stuff that's really smart, and in some cases stuff where I'm like, could I use that? Would I get in trouble if I just did that?
How close is this versus how can I obfuscate it?
Yeah. But it's great. I mean, it's a great community, and it's really fun to watch them do their thing.
I mean, that's how you know when people are that engaged and that kind of vociferous about what they think is the truth. The one I see coming up most often is what's the real deal with the scary numbers in macro data refinement. And so my question to you is, I'm assuming you're not going to tell us what is really the deal. So what is your favorite incorrect assumption about what it might be?
Oh boy, let's see. I'm trying to think, because there have been a lot of really good ones. I'm trying to think if there's one that I want to admit is incorrect. I mean, definitely a lot of people have sort of assumed that it's some sort of just kind of the first thing you would expect, which is some kind of like data mining or something like that, people's private records, which is you know, it may well be something like that. But I will say that was, when we were figuring out what the numbers are, that was sort of one of the first things that we thought. And it became this thing of like, what can we do that's at either different or some kind of an elevation of that, you know, where, so all I'll say is that I hope that it's not, I hope that it's something that people will be surprised by. I hope it's something that will feel both like it makes sense looking back, but that it also is a little bit counterintuitive. It's kind of a half answer.
And one hopes that the truth will in some way align with Lumen's 9 values. Let me say that
as all things should.
For the audience, and I'll be watching to see if Dan mouths them along with me. We have vision, verve, wit, cheer, humility, benevolence, nimbleness, probity, and wiles.
Yeah.
Nice.
I had to listen to you say it first on a couple of the middle, but I got there by the end.
I consider myself pretty well read, but I still had to Google probity to make sure I was interpreting it correctly.
What is it? I forget what it means. What does it mean?
Let's you know, we'll have some research and bring that back later in the talk, you know, to make sure we both internalize it.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that those were, as you say, much debated, and or that some went in and some came out in terms of the final 9 when you were debating them. But I was shocked to find out that Lumen had a dress code.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I guess the first of all, the immediate question is the dress code is black, white, navy, gray, and pastels. As if you weren't already depressed, you're allowed to have pastels at Lumen. But I guess how much of this do you expect that that the characters themselves sort of take in on day one, or are these things that have kind of been policed among the Lumen employees over time and become kind of facts and rules? Are there distinctions between some of the things that we hear?
Yeah, I think so. And by the way, just real quick, I looked it up. Probity, the quality of having strong moral principles, honesty, and decency. So I think part of that is dressing right. And so we, yeah, I mean, the dress code is a funny thing specifically because I think it is, as it is in real life, sort of a way of policing the way people express themselves and sort of the level of your own humanity that you're allowed to bring into the workplace and your own individuality. But then I think it is probably also artificially policed and muted even more by the company itself, where, yeah, like they probably are not, you know, there's a color scheme. But the other thing that we've talked about that hasn't really come into play much in the show yet is that it would all have to be closed without any sort of label or writing, because it has to get through the code detectors, because, you know, any sort of written symbols whatsoever won't go. And so you know, we've talked about how there may be like a severance friendly clothing stores, like where if you're working a severed job, there's a specific store you can go to that has stuff with no writing whatsoever. But yeah, that's all you know, that's stuff that would have to be explained to the outie, whereas most of the actual in-office behavior stuff would be explained to the innie. And I imagine on both sides, it's a bit of an education. It takes a while to sort of, you know, we see Helly sort of clumsily bumping up against the rules. And I think that's something that probably happens for all of them.
Quite often, yeah. And you've answered a few questions there in the sense that obviously we know that there's enough of a severed population that there's also anti-Lumen sentiment and anti-severance kind of movements, and clearly a need for retail locations. So I guess within the world of the show, what is your kind of estimate of how many people we're talking about, less as a number and more as does it approximate a percentage point? Is it a part of a given town only, or because you bring up a lot of questions there. Right.
It's a really, really good question. I actually have never been asked that before. And I want to make sure that I don't get, you know, the apple dart in my neck.
Yes, this is kind of an occupational hazard for you throughout this whole talk, I think.
They're standing out the door with the blow dart thing. It's really overkill in my opinion. But yeah, I think I think it's less than a percentage at this point.
Okay.
It's in the culture. It's like, we see that it's something people are discussing at dinner parties or non-dinner parties, and it's something that is debated and is probably, there are think pieces all over the internet about it and that kind of thing. But I think at this point it's still very rare. There are other severed offices. There are other Lumen severed offices around the world, in various places. But like, for example, there are states where it's not legal, and there and others where it is. So there's a lot of that. A lot of that is sort of world building stuff that we haven't even really gotten into on screen yet. But I think that's one of the most interesting parts, especially if we do expand a little more into other parts of the Audi world moving ahead, it's deep sci-fi versus Armageddon sci-fi, where I always think it's really interesting when you're looking at how it would affect a culture and a society, which is Deep Impact, by the way.
Clearly, and
I love both films.
Obviously, but yes, if you had to choose, it's yes. And you confirmed something that I wasn't sure was an actual narrative fact, as opposed to a line from Mark. He's so earnest when he tells Helly about the code detectors, that I wasn't sure whether that was an immutably true fact or something that he had been told and digested, but I appreciate A, that he pointed it out, and B, that he knew what she was going to do with the pen cap, because it took, I think, us a little bit longer.
Yeah, well, he's speaking from experience.
Well, okay, I love this, and I'm excited to get further into that part of things. But I should have said this at the beginning, but clearly, to the degree that you are able to answer questions, spoilers abound from this point forward. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I found so interesting is that when the show begins, the name Mark S. is so generic, with all respect to the wonderful Adam Scott, but the name is so generic that you sort of glaze over it right away. The name Helly, on the other hand, pretty rare. I don't know if I've ever known a Helly. Have you? And was it intentional to kind of keep that nod to her birth name? Or because I know you've lived with this script for a while, so I wasn't sure if that was something that you always wanted to be the case. Right.
It's funny. I was trying to remember this recently, and I honestly don't remember exactly where the name Helly came from. I think it had, sometimes I'll do like a late night, like name search Google binge thing and just like find something. It's like, oh, this means blank in this language. So therefore it's good. And then I'll forget the next day why I picked it. So that may have happened a little bit, but I think it did have something to do with it's a shortening of the word Helly in a bit, and conscious or otherwise, just the fact that the name sort of stirs up this idea of raising hell and upending things. So I think, but then yeah, it did become. It wasn't until later that we actually conceived of this turn of her being an Egan, and so then it's that was sort of a happy accident where it's like her name almost feels incomplete, like we're waiting to hear the other side, the other part of it, waiting to find out who she really is. So I think it all worked out.
Yeah, it definitely has sort of the air of anticipation in a way that a Dylan or an Irv doesn't. So yeah, right. Definitely that hit.
Well, and Mark was also, that's the only character that's that's named after a real person, because that character is named after my dad. So yeah, I mean,
shout out to Mark. Okay.
Shout out to Mark Erickson. Yeah. A very hardworking person who I thought deserved to have a character named after him, but I feel bad because of all the terrible things that Mark ends up being put through.
Yeah, did he have a real kind of relationship with him once he saw him on screen?
I don't know if sharing a name made them feel an immediate bond or not, but yeah, I don't know. It was something. It was funny in the writing process, being like, okay, and then this next Mark witnesses a murder, and I'm like, oh, sorry, Dad.
Here we go again. Yeah, this episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we are. So you mentioned this was your first writing room, if I understood correctly. Is that right?
Yeah.
What was the most surprising thing that you wound up going 18 rounds over? Well, I guess I should back up and ask you, what was essential to be a writer in the Severance room? What were you looking for? What was sort of the quality that meant to you, yeah, this is somebody who's going to play well in this sandbox?
That was a tricky, it felt like a very narrow line to hit, because it is a very specific tone, but we wanted people who were funny. We knew that a lot of the language of the show is told through humor, and so I think that was a really important, whether or not they were overtly comedic scripts, we wanted people who were had that sort of wry, even at times absurdist humor to their voice. But at the same time, I mean, we were creating such a world from scratch that we needed people who knew we're going to be good at that. And so we looked at, really people from really cool sci-fi shows that we liked. And ultimately, though, it came down to just everybody's sample, whether it was a play or a pilot or whatever else, a feature. It just had to be sort of an initial, something had to click when we were reading it and make us think, yeah, they could operate in this world.
And then, so once you assembled your sort of team of covert, hilarious world builders, were there big debates that were sort of constants that came up over and over again, or things that or fun activities? When I think about the euphemisms around, say, a wellness check or the break room, I feel like that's kind of a writer's room activity that might have gone on for a long time. The euphemism of what is HR, what is the commissary? Yeah.
No, it was fun. I mean, there was a lot. I wouldn't say that there was any, there wasn't much fighting or discord. We were all, I think, pretty much of the same mind on most of this stuff, but there were a lot of really fun debates. We talked about, like, Miss Casey in particular, that character who, again, spoiler alert, we had to create a character that was sort of an important character hidden in plain sight, where, by the time you realize who she actually is and her relationship to Mark, you're looking back and you're like, oh God, how did I miss that? And a character that seemed like they could exist as just kind of a funny, quirky side character, and we would accept her as that enough that we don't suspect her of being the other thing. And so there was, like, at one point she was going to be this, like, weird sort of traveling vendor, like selling things between departments, and there were a lot of sort of kooky different iterations of that character, and we just had a really good time improvising and coming up with other ways that we could portray her. And then the other thing that comes to mind is, so when Helly puts the let me out
arms
on her arms, we had a lot of discussion about, like, how that would work. Like, and at one point it was like, we were all writing in pen on our fingers, and we were like, would she do it this way? Would she sort of try to write it across the knuckles? But then we were like, no, because then the individual letter would still, so she'd have to cut up the letters. So maybe something like this. So there's a whole bunch of photos from that time of just us, various awkward, appendages with Sharpie writing on them.
I'll be trying to get at that during the clip, of course, just trying to write on my arm, see if I can manage it. But it's I have one question about Ms. Casey before we get there, although we'll have many. My impression of her, the way she ended up, was that the name Miss Casey, when everybody else is used as a first name, implies almost like a romper room kind of character or kindergarten teacher. You know, Miss Angela or Miss Stephanie, somebody who is benevolently able to see everybody at all times. I don't know if that was sort of the intent when she was a traveling vendor as well. But definitely that separation and that sort of honorific that she has gave her that extra element.
Yeah. No, it's funny. I think she did have a different name back when she was like a traveling vendor. But yeah, the name Miss Casey was sort of supposed to invoke that off the bat. But then also in hindsight, it's like almost the melding of a first name and a last name. And you know, we have this convention where the severed characters have first names and the unsevered ones have last names. And the fact that her first name or last name could also be a first name, you know, it's sort of meant to invoke this idea that she's of both worlds a little bit.
Well, let's get to know her a little bit. This is clip number 1, please.
Your Audi is generous. Your Audi is fond of music and owns many records. Your Audi is a friend to children and to the elderly and the insane. Your Audi is strong and helps someone lift a heavy object. Your Audi attends many dances and is popular among the other attendees. Your Audi likes films and owns a machine that can play them. Your Audi is splendid and can swim gracefully and well. I'm sorry. Please try to enjoy each fact equally and not show preference for any over the others. That's 10 points off. You have 90 points remaining.
Points?
Please don't speak.
I think that enjoy each fact equally is one of my very, very favorite moments of the show, and then one of my favorite rules. Do you think this one I'm attributing right to Keir Egan? Do you think there's a reason behind it that's an easily explained sort of moral reason?
Yeah, I think there is. I think it's. Yeah, I think it's about how sort of all qualities must be kept in balance, you know, and we can't let our passion for one thing overwhelm the other thing. I'm sure Keir could say it more eloquently than that if you asked him, but I agree that it comes right from him.
The combination of these characters obviously is brilliantly constructed from you, but I have to assume that in the context of the show, that each severed worker is put together carefully and on purpose. For example, is it an accident that Helly is placed in macro data refinement, even though we have a spot open because of Petey? It seems as though you know, would Helly's any work as well in a different department?
Right. It's a good question. My thought had been that Helena Egan was planning to join, and I think specifically was planning to join macrodata refinement. That's not to say that caused Petey's ousting. I see it more as something where she was sort of waiting for an opening. But I don't think I can say any more beyond that.
We will steer safely away, or not too far away. It was my opinion, but this is just me, watching that when we see Helly try and fail to resign, that whether or not it might be possible for somebody to resign, certainly it doesn't seem like any of our team have ever seen that. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, I mean, Dylan has that line towards the beginning where he says, good luck getting it approved, and Mark's like, yeah, they tend to get rejected. I'm not sure if it's never worked, but I think it's sort of one of these things where it's like they just assume it's like, yeah, it's like putting a complaint in the complaint box. You'll never hear about it again. Yeah, I don't know if I'd say never, but certainly rarely.
It makes it that much more exciting than the combination of people that you have in there, because, for example, Mark R is quite well indoctrinated, even though PD was, as far as we know, trying to plot, certainly make a map, certainly, trying to figure things out before he left.
Right.
So you kind of go, well, Mark's earnestness must have been kind of a nice spot for Peter to hide behind, or was he trying to tell Mark things that Mark wasn't hearing?
Yeah. Well, it is interesting. I think I think the line is in there where Petey says to Mark, you tried to quit, which implies two things. Like, it implies that his resignation request didn't come through because he is out, he didn't get it. And also that he had sort of a rebel period, that this Mark, who we now see, who is this kind of, snarky but overall contented company man, that there was maybe something else before that, and that maybe he had an initial reaction that was a little more akin to how Helly is reacting. And that's something that we sort of talked about is like with the flow chart entry, entry welcome that Mark has to do, that sort of has all these different, if she says this, you have to do this. And you wonder how that was created, and how many people have come in here and freaked out and threatened to kill somebody, that they've got it down to the science of like, well, no, if you just walk them through this way, they'll eventually calm down. So it's fun because to me, it speaks at a much longer history. Like, you wonder how long they've been doing this to the point where they have it down to a science like that.
Well, we do wonder, Dan. We're just here trying to wear you down. So
if only somebody knew. If only somebody knew, and they could say it. But no, alas, no one knows.
But the opening, that opening sequence in the conference room, it brings up. I don't know whether this is an unpopular opinion or not, but in a show full of dread, for my mind, the biggest dread and the creepiest guy in the place is Milchick and his beautiful big smile. He has to carry around all the enthusiasm and all the enforcement. Is there? I suspect there's more that we don't know about him. Is that true, or did you have fun writing him in sort of double speak? What's the origin of Milchick there?
I don't think that's an unpopular opinion, or it shouldn't be, because I completely agree with you. And that, I mean, ultimately, 99% of that is owed to Tremel Tillman, who is just this utter force of nature of an actor, and created this, really thoughtfully created this brilliantly enigmatic character that could be both the funniest and the scariest thing on screen, in the same moment. And the fact that it worked that well, I would say that is the character, I think Tremel is the actor who transformed the character maybe more even than any other on the show, in terms of like, that was written as not a vastly different character, but just a little bit more of a kind of boring by the numbers HR guy. And some of the malice was there because it was, it's sort of intrinsic in everything that Lumen does, this sort of smiling malice. But as soon as Tremel was in there doing his thing, we were sort of like, oh, that's who he is. That's who Milchick is. And so, yeah, a lot of it just happened on screen in front of me, and I just got to sit back and watch. But he was always supposed to be sort of this smiling, double speaking face of the company, who was the one telling you everything was okay, while also telling you with his face that everything is not okay.
And that's kind of the beauty of getting to do TV on top of everything else, is that when you see somebody do something like that and you realize, oh, the alchemy of it's all coming together here. They have fit in that last piece of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. We'll take a little bit of a look at that in our second clip. If we can have that one, please.
Well, my name is Irving, as you all know, and I've worked here for 3 years, and something about me is that I know all 9 core Lumen principles.
Awesome. What's your favorite?
All 9. But today, I think I'd say cheer.
Great. Up. No trust fall today, Irv.
Oh, right.
No.
So that is another one of those scenes that I think could have probably gone on for half the episode. I would have spent all that time learning facts about each and every person.
Yeah.
Were there any other surprises for you in terms of casting or where the characters kind of went once their performers were in bed with them?
Yeah, I mean, all of them to one extent or another, for sure. I mean, you know, I mentioned Trammell, but every actor sort of brought in something that I didn't know was there, and created something that was like, I mean, it's a really weird, unique feeling that isn't like anything else. Like when you sort of create half of something and then the other person comes in and shows you what the other half of it is, and it's not always what you expect, and in a way that's scary, but it was so fun and rewarding because all of these, you know, people did such great things with it. But yeah, like you know, John Turturro brought in sort of this austere, gentlemanly vibe that was in the character a little bit but not, you know, maybe not quite to that extent. And you know, sort of turned, you know, created the mannerisms of the character, and it was just, as soon as he was on screen doing it, we're like, okay, now we know Irving. Like it's, and now as we're like writing the later episodes or rewriting stuff, it becomes easier because it's like, now we know who Irving is. But yeah, I mean, every single actor did that in some way.
Well, and you have some huge names that you might be wondering if the names kind of supersede the characters, but they really disappear within them. Patricia Arquette and Christopher Walken and everybody really was in this tight cast. What did you tell to whom? Some of your actors are playing dual roles. Some of them kind of know that, or we think they kind of know that, and some do not. Was it case by case, or were you quite protective over, you know, there's some shows you hear about the scripts going out under lock and key. So yeah, what was sort of your philosophy?
It was sort of case by case, and I let the actor sort of lead that conversation because I wanted to help them in whatever way was best for them in sort of crafting the performance. I remember Britt Lauer, who plays Helly, wanted to know very little. I think that she was sort of more of the mind of she wants to know exactly what her character knows. She wants to go on this scary awakening and journey with Helly. without knowing too much of the context. I forget when we did actually tell her that spoiler alert, Helly is an Egan. I forget when we shared that with her, but I think it was a bit into the process. She certainly knew by the time that she was like in episode 1, she records this message back to herself, which was actually done a little later in production. But yeah, it was different for each actor, I think. And in some cases, we didn't fully know. I mean, we built a lot of these characters knowing that we wouldn't them on the outside this season, barely at all. And so, in some cases, we had like a rough idea of, for example, who Dylan is outside, but there were gaps of it that we hadn't filled in ourselves yet. So we weren't able to fully have that conversation with Zach, even if he had wanted to at that point.
Speaking of Dylan, I always assumed that, I don't know when you had sort of the genesis of the waffle party and all that entails kind of lined up. But, one of the things about it is that you assume that under any other circumstances, a guy like Dylan is going to want to tell everybody every solitary detail. But it's so weird he actually can't. Like, nobody would believe him. Yeah. I don't know if that was on, whether that came first or whether there was a version of the waffle party that was less of
that. Yeah, there was. I think it may have started as a joke, and I hesitate to say that because I really liked what it ended up being, but there was at one point in the room where we were like, well, what if it was sort of this oddly sexual, perverse thing? But then the more I think we talked about it, the more that it kind of made sense in terms of that, we're in this office where, basically you're not allowed access to that part of yourself, that part of your psyche. And that, like anything else, Lumen would take it and sort of commodify it and use it as a way to sort of, as a, carrot to keep people going the right direction. And, in a world where everything is commodified, that would sort of be the ultimate prize. And so, it felt like sort of an appropriately terrifying exploration of what sex would look like in a world like this. And then also the fact, of course, that they are sort of playing out this this weird old image from the paintings of Keir taming the four tempers, and that it's like, well, it's like you can feel those feelings, but they have to come from the company. They have to be given to you from on high by the company. And so it all just, it was uncomfortable and weird, but it felt like what Lumen would do. But there were definitely moments that, talking through it in the development where we're like, okay, are we seriously doing this though? Are we seriously, that's what the waffle party is? Okay. All right, let's do it.
Just somebody waiting for somebody else to say, maybe we shouldn't.
Right. And then no one said it. So we're like,
nobody
okay.
did it. But it makes sense because as there are so many different ways that we see that Lumen is there's a bigger religious parallel than anything else, to my eyes, at least, from everything from the art to the values to the Solveig's or Kobel's shrine. Potato. Yeah,
potato.
But the compunction statement was the one that really got me. That was the one that felt much less about, that's sort of the real sort of crux of when work becomes more than just a workplace. Where it's the sorriness and the apology. Was that an evolution? Was that something you always knew you wanted to do? Sort of those religious overtones and the slightly weird sexual rewards as a result?
Yeah, I mean, different ideas came at different stages, certainly, but I think that the religious and in some ways cult-like elements, I think they sort of evolved naturally because I think there is in some case a weird blurry line between corporate a corporate culture and a cult. And you know, when you are asked to work at a place where they tell you that, you know, your family here, and they give you lists of values of how to behave, and in some cases, you know, you may work at a place with this where there's a cult of personality around the CEO and almost a hero worship around this CEO, and this idea that, like, well, you know, this person, it's okay to give yourself and give your labor over to this person because this is someone who's going to save the world, you know, and we're not just making coffee here, we're supporting this figure who's going to go on and save the world. I'm not talking about anything specific, of course, but but I had just, that's something I had noticed for a while, that like there are these weird, the Venn diagram of how like a cult or even a religion will ask you to behave or ask you to think, and you know, the way that certain workplaces operate, like there is overlap over there. There is overlap there, and then of course, you know, we did look at different you know, like real scary cults. People are made to, you know, do horrific things, and the tactics that those people used. And so again, it was kind of the slippery slope or the wavy line between those things that I was interested in, and you know, how Lumen could sort of bring all those things together in a really spooky way. Well,
like all cults, they are convinced they're doing the right thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's I assume that somewhere in the high up Lumen brass, that somewhere in the Egans, they believe that what they're doing is helping someone.
Yes.
Probably. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, wait, I don't want to confirm anything I shouldn't, but no, I'll say in the vaguest terms that was something we talked about and that we thought was important, was just this, like, you know, nobody is really evil for the sake of evil. There are people who are greedy and selfish and don't really have morals per se that come out in their behavior. But that, you know, it's more interesting, I think, if this big, scary, shadowy, conglomerate corporate villain actually believes in something, twisted though it is, like that's going to create for more interesting conflicts and more interesting sort of philosophical debates as our heroes try to figure out and then take down what this company is trying to do. So yeah, we in coming up with like what their ultimate ethos is and their ultimate goal is, we tried to make something that sort of made a moral sense, like that made some moral sense, even if it was really skewed and scary.
Right. That for somebody, if you accept X, then also Y, and then they think, right.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of moral quandaries and complex things, we're going to be going to questions in just a couple of minutes. So please send them in if you have questions for Dan about the show, and you know, see if you can get around those laser filters and apple darts. In the meantime, though, a couple more questions for you. There's so much lore here, since there's so much depth. I wonder whether at this point in your press tour, whether there's anything that you desperately wish somebody would ask that nobody has yet.
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, no one has asked me, and I take offense to this, how severance might be used in like the process of getting in shape or getting healthy or dieting or exercising. And I just want to say, I think that there are some maybe really scary answers potentially to that question. So that's something that maybe maybe moving ahead will add to the discourse.
Sure, because I can see how, if you have the technology, right, that somebody at Lumen might want to expand into. Yeah, that's a real market there, huh?
Imagine if you could
and
sever your workout. If you could just, it's okay. I'm gonna do 3 hours in the gym now.
Yeah, I don't think my answer is supposed to be sign me up, but I can see where it would turn heads for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting. That are there other places that you're debating whether Lumen can go? Obviously, we saw Gabby and the childbirth sort of conundrum that happened with she and Mark's sister. So we know that it is beginning to be adopted elsewhere. But are there other places that of things that maybe people could outsource?
I think that list is endless, which I think is why, ultimately, more than anything, that's why this was a TV show and not a film or a miniseries. Because early in the process, I spoke to my manager, format for this, and it was ultimately the fact that there are so many applications for this technology that's what really made us want to keep it going. Because I think that Gabby in the birthing center, that's really scary the more you scratch at it, but it just opens the door to other things. It's like almost anything that you don't like could theoretically be severed away. And I think that that just opens the door to a really cool world, a really interesting world.
Yeah, especially when you think about what haven't we thought of about who are we already seeing? Because it's not like people who are severed are wearing any sort of indication just yet.
Indication. It was.
Say that last one again.
I made a joke. I said indication.
Oh.
It's all right.
Wow.
I apologize.
All right.
I apologize.
No, not at all. I'm just realizing that my own Audi is at this moment somewhere, relaxing and laughing at me.
We are both. Okay, I think we're both at work, so we are technically both in any form right now.
Yeah, it's and it's nice to know that I guess maybe this is the entry point, right? That there's another me having a wonderful, glamorous life out there. It's like Instagram, but all the time. So we have a question from Adam, who asks, did you have any input in the insanely detail-driven set design and prop creation process, or did that come from Ben Stiller's meticulous tendencies? Or a third option that's not in the binary, I guess.
Right. Well, thank you for the question, actor Adam Scott. You could have just called me, but I appreciate it. No, yeah, it was, some of that was in the script. I mean, the script was definitely described these sort of sterile maze-like hallways. And I think the script did specify MDR having these really big, these really weird proportions of this big wide space and then the small kind of cubicle sort of island in the middle. But beyond that, the vast majority of it was stuff like just meetings that we had with Ben and with Jeremy Hindle and Jessica Gagne, who was our DP. And many others who were involved with sort of creating the overall look of it. So it was a mix. I mean, I think the basics of it were there, but then it got really fleshed out through the communal process.
I'm assuming that you were on set most of the time, if not all the time. So how much of your life would you say that you spent watching people walk through hallways?
All of it for a while. I mean, that was all I was doing because it was in the pandemic. So it was that, and then I would go home and but most of the space around us. The funny thing is, we had the set that had this, you know, weird endless series of white hallways, and then in the soundstage beyond that were even more endless white hallways that like didn't look too dissimilar from the set. So there was this really weird, you know, and then yeah, I would be sitting watching the monitors, so it's like there's the world of the show, and then it's really happening out here. It got very confusing after a while, what was real and what was not.
Yeah, I started thinking about, you know, if people were called just for walking days, you know, that you could see your actors just suiting up for 4 or 5 hours at a time of just hallways, happy hallways, curious hallways, alarmed hallways.
Every kind,
and more to come. Here is there's a great question from Sarah, who writes, some of the innie vernacular is just a little bit off. For example, eager lemur or dewy mouthed are both quite understandable, but a bit jarring. How did you come up with that linguistic vibe?
Yeah, we sort of wanted to give a sense that it's like an insular world. It's like, this is a town where the pass was blocked off, you know, back in the 30s. And so these people sort of, you know, created their own vernacular and their own language a little bit. You know, it is just such a cutoff world that we wanted to make it feel like it had its own culture a little bit. But that also might have just been a justification for me to like write goofy stuff that I thought was funny in the moment. I don't know. That was sort of the language and the logic kind of informed each other mutually in that case.
There's obviously, we know that the innies have no access to tech or any sort of online world or anything like that. But it seems as though even outside, the cars seem a little bit older. That the houses are not super decked out. So is that just in the world of Keir, the town, or does it extend further? Like, is this sort of a Lumen world philosophy?
Right. It's a really interesting question that I don't have a total firm answer to, because yeah, to some extent it is just a slightly stylized world. But in another way, I mean, one thing we talked a lot about was giving this sense that even when you're not in the company, like even when you're not down in the basement, you're still in Lumen in a way, like that you know, you're not in the belly of the beast, but you still might be within its grasp, you know, if you're out in the town, and that in a way that's maybe more insidious than we realize. The town really is an extension of the company in some ways. So, you know, once we had established that the inside had this aesthetic of being a little bit out of space and time, and sort of a little bit intentionally disorienting in space and time, where you couldn't, you know, they don't know where they are or exactly when they are, but that some of that sort of bled into the outside. So that, you know, like, we never specify the exact year in the show, we never specify the exact state. And so there's, you know, we wanted to maintain some of that. Now, if we were to go to New York City in this world, would it be similarly sort of quirky and strange? I honestly don't know yet. I don't have an answer, but I think it's an interesting question in regard to the world building.
Well, and one more that's largely from me is there's very specific language all the time around some people live in the town of Keir. And it's specified more than once. Some people do. Is that true? Are there people who live outside of the town who make it to Lumen?
Like people who work at Lumen but don't live in the city of Keir proper? I think so.
Okay.
I think they're probably, yeah. I think most of them probably live in Keir, but you could have someone from like the wider county area.
That would pass the screening process if they weren't, you know, too immersed in an outside world.
Question. It's a good question.
I mean, a little bit to put you on the spot, but mostly not. We have a question from Jeff who wants to know, who are your favorite short story and novel writers? And have any of them fed into your conception or style of Severance?
That's a really good question. And I always freeze up the moment anybody asks me something like that. And then later I'm like, oh, I should have said this person. I mean, Vonnegut is an easy choice, and certainly was inspirational in you know, somebody that I read when I was, you know, in my early 20s and got obsessed with, and informed a lot of my language and style and tone. I like to think. And then like George Saunders is someone I really like. Yeah, I mean, those would be the first that come to mind. And then, I mean, there's, you know, people everyone knows, you know, it's, you know, Kafka and people like that who definitely made their way into the tone.
I would assume too that the same goes for people ask about TV influences. Everybody knows when you're working, you have no time to watch anything. But in between brief hiatuses or whatnot, what have you enjoyed?
Oh man,
whether similar or far away.
Recent stuff.
Like real shows, yeah. Like when you were talking, for example, about the hero worship of a CEO, I thought, oh well, you've also seen The Dropout then. But no, what have you been enjoying in terms of just other stuff that's sort of in the same yearly demo as Severance, that's been in kind of the same zeitgeist?
I did Dropout, and I love The Dropout. I thought it was great. It's interesting to be making the show at a time when there are a couple of those like true life, you know, fraudulent CEO miniseries happening. I mean, there's that, there's We Crashed, there's others, but I think that I also really I love all those shows, and I also absolutely am obsessed with Succession. I think is terrific, and I think like at our you know at our highest aspiration, we would be sort of another side of the coin of, because I think people are really interested right now in those you know, big huge capitalists doing terrible things stories. And I think that that's because there's a lot of people questioning, like, oh my God, is this system really benefiting any of us? Is this, you know, is this something where corruption is just able to run rampant? And I think that shows like that are looking at that and sort of, but, you know, we're seeing sort of the CEO side of it, you know, whereas something like Severance, obviously it's different tonally and genre wise, but, you know, it is a story that I think looks at some of those same themes, but, you know, we're with the workers on this one, and we're down, and the focus is basically effects that this system is having on these people who are trying to live their lives. So I think it's really exciting it's a really exciting time to be making TV, and especially making TV about work and about, you know, the system that employs us, because I think that that's something a lot of people are talking about right now. I also love Yellow Jackets. I thought Yellow Jackets was terrific. I thought it was really scary.
It was scary and delicious. And Bart and Ashley, the creators, were here with us doing a talk a few months ago, and they were amazing.
Yeah, I'm fanboying over that, because that was a really cool show.
Yeah, delicious also. But yeah, to your earlier point, I am not the creator of this term, but I really enjoyed somebody said we're really in the middle of a scamdemic television, you know, starting with Firefest. So yeah, there's a lot there.
Right. Firefest did kind of kick it off. Yeah.
And then it was like, well, we need more. We just want to cringe more.
Yeah.
We have a question from Svanik. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Who writes, was it your original intention to write episode 9 as a breaking away from the traditional ABC screenplay structure of the first 8 episodes?
That's a really good question. Kind of, but not really. Not consciously. We weren't like, you know, screw you, Sid Field. We're gonna go our own way on this last one. But it was more like we wanted to do something where we could have done all the structural work of sort of setting up every single domino and then just let it tip. And we wanted the last episode to feel extremely visceral and fast and like, you know, we were experiencing it in the same crazy, confused state as the innies were. So I think that sort of naturally led to something that didn't feel as sort of rigorously or carefully structured as the previous episodes. So yeah, again, it wasn't totally conscious, but I think that we got there because we wanted this to feel like just a absolute visceral kind of panic show.
Speaking of, we talked about kind of the zeitgeist of work shows that you're in, but also in the zeitgeist of it used to be that shows like this had 8 episodes, maybe 6, maybe 10. Now we're in this odd numbered sequence. Was that did it keep you up nights to go, yeah, we're going to end on episode 9?
Yeah, just the OCD. You're like, there should be one more.
Yeah.
Come on. Yeah, no, we were, and I've said this before, I'm pretty sure I can say this. We were originally going to do 10 episodes. And part of that was, you know, over the course of the pandemic, like we had to sort of tighten some things in order, you know, for budgetary or production reasons. But we also just, I think we reached a point where it felt like the right number, like it just sort of, in order to tell everything we wanted to tell at the pace we wanted to tell it, you know, we got to this point where it was like, this just feels right. So, you know, we could have pushed to keep it at 10, but I think that we sort of had this instinct that it was, that this was the place to get out.
I think it was a good call. The cry of outrage when you realize it's the last one and where it stops is sort of heard throughout. So I think well done. We have about 5 minutes time for just a couple of questions. And Megan wants to know, what was the development process for the show? Who was the first person to say yes?
Wow. Well, the first person to say yes was my manager, Ben Blake, who was extremely supportive. Again, I was driving for Postmates when he took me on, and he saw something special in this show, and really helped me sort of get things moving. This publication called The Blood List said yes. They were you know, they're a genre specific take on something like The Blacklist, where they take unproduced scripts that people are into but no one's made, and they sort of elevate them, which is, you know, they've been doing for years, and it's great. And then Jackie Cohen, who's a producer at Red Hour, was the first person to actually like read the script and be like, I think we could make this, like I think we could make this. And then she brought it to Ben, and then, you know, once Ben had said yes, then a lot of other people said yes. But yeah, Ben, I mean, the really exciting thing was in meeting with Ben, how immediately like thoughtful he was about it, and, you know, sort of the opposite of this celebrity who comes in and sort of slaps their name on something. It was like right away he was like, okay, we need to, you know, if we're going to do this, we need to get into this and this, and we need to figure all this stuff out. And I was very happy to do so. I was like, yeah, let's hit the ground running. But yeah, it was a long time. I mean, it took from when I version of the pilot to when it was like almost 10 years. And
you know, that's the reality of the quote unquote overnight success, right? It takes a minute sometimes. Yeah, exactly.
Over many hungry nights.
I think as I guess a final question there. So over 10 years, there's going to be so many permutations and notes and versions and things of that nature. And now you're in the position of not only did you make it, not only is it a complete critical success, but you get to make more. Is there one element that you mentioned, a little hint of one? Is there one thing that you sort of had to leave by the wayside for space or time or availability that you're excited to get back to in season 2 or subsequent seasons?
Yeah, sure. There a lot, and I don't think I can say anything about any of them, but yeah, there's definitely plenty of you know, Ben is a very you know, he wanted us to make sure that we were giving the show room to breathe and giving the characters room to feel organic, and that we weren't rushing from one thriller beat to another. So, you know, there's plenty of story, you know, that we had talked about for season 1 that may well end up in season 2. Because, you know, but ultimately the most exciting thing is just what's going to happen to these characters that we've come to love and really care about.
And are they going to be able to find the goats again?
I mean, it's Chekhov's goat. You know, you can't put a goat on screen and then do nothing with it. But who knows?
There's
that rule.
No greater promise than that. Dan Erickson, thank you so much for being with us here at VIF Creator Talks. This is absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
It's been so much fun. Thank you so much for having me, and to everybody. This has been great.